Hello? 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 I don't know if anyone can hear me. Jenny? Jenny? Ivan, Michael? Can you hear me? Why can't I hear you?
I think you can.
I think I can.
The magic of technology.
Okay, that's a relief. That's a relief. It's a little bit
It
like...
is. That's all right.
Yeah. Hi,
Hello.
Ivan. Hi. Well, now you talk.
We
Now
just
you
found,
talk.
well, because I lowered the telly and we just got the results for the COVID tests because Nadine had some patients and they were positive, so she needed tested because she felt she had symptoms. And Maria's giving immunizations tomorrow, so she held off her shift until she got the results of a test. So, and the twins are in the living room where I'm normally sitting. Isolating because somebody at school had a positive result as well.
Oh, bless you. What a nightmare.
Well, at least it means I'm not grounded.
That's true. That is true. Hi, Michael. How you doing?
All right. Finished my 8-day conference, so looking forward to a day of doing nothing tomorrow.
That sounds idyllic. Congratulations and also commiserations. That sounds tiring and potentially boring.
It's with science the interesting mix of extremely interesting and my God, this is dull. Can I fall asleep now?
What science is it, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to say, what science is it? Also, hi, Tris.
It was the Materials Research Society, so all sorts of things.
What does that mean, please?
Anything to do with materials, so physics, chemistry, engineering.
That's quite a broad spectrum there.
That's not science. You don't fool me.
Everything from biology membranes to photonic nanostructures.
Wow.
That's the secret, Frankie. It's all science.
It's all science all the way down. Well, if
all the way round.
if the kind of the coverage of your conference was all things, I'm quite surprised you managed to get it covered in 8 days.
8 days, yeah. Well,
It's one more than God.
2 more.
I was going to say, it took God 7. Like,
6.
That's quite impressive. Oh, yes, 6.
Hey, tests are important. You include breaks.
Listen. I lapsed a long time ago. I have not been to mass in many, many years.
It does mean that science appears to be something like 87% effective as God.
And
That should
Michael
be the new tagline for science.
87% is effective as God. Michael just spent 8 days studying maths, so if you ever want to relapse, he's probably your man.
That's excellent. Hi, Ashura. Hi, Kitty. Hi, Kitty.
Hi, I literally just caught up like 3 minutes ago on yesterday.
Enjoyed it?
Yes, it was amazing. Last night I was having Christmas dinner with my mum, so that there's 2 weeks and then she can hang out with my brothers. So we ordered an Indian, but halfway, like just before we ordered the Indian, I found out that a friend from work died of COVID, so ended up getting pretty drunk, and I've been hungover today. So yeah, it's a slow one.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear about that. And I hope that you I hope you still had like a nice Christmas dinner with your mum.
Yeah, I kind of like was able to put that down yesterday, and like it was okay. I'm okay. It's mostly like a lot of people at work are really sad, understandably, but yeah.
Rough times. How are you feeling today, alcohol-wise? Are you at least not too hungover?
I'm not super hungover. I woke up and was basically an irritable grizzly. So I'm glad that that's slightly less there now.
Mm,
And cinnamon
That's-
rolls are about to happen, and that's the most
Yeah.
important thing.
That's not a nice thing to be, but it's a very cute thing to think about. So thank you for that very adorable mental image, and I'm glad that you're feeling better.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you don't have to experience it because you would not think so.
That is true. Yeah, it's very cute from a distance over here. Hi Rory. Hi Jonathan. Jonathan, your facial hair gets more distinguished every time I see you, which, considering I see you every single night, is quite impressive. That's amazing. Like, is this natural? You know, these like the kind of the two like sort of distinguished greying stripes there.
Yeah, it's totally natural. I don't do anything to it.
My God,
Surprisingly symmetrical.
it's very symmetrical.
Yeah, it looks really good.
It doesn't it?
Don't know how long it'll be like that. It might just all go grey very quickly. So enjoy it while you can.
You'll still rock it. You'll still rock it. I wish I had a beard like that. Like, I would quite like a sort of, you know, like a distinguished professor type beard like that. If you ever get sick of it, I'll have it.
How
Yeah,
you
you're beautiful as you are, Frankie, and yeah, better without a beard probably.
Have they figured out how to make like beard wigs yet that are like as good as hair wigs? Because that's just something I really want to exist. I'd really love to be able to just like put on a beard for a little bit, like the literal kind, not the metaphorical kind.
Yeah. Hi Ashra. Hi
Lots
Shira.
of drag kings have them. Hello.
That's true. Hi.
That is true. That is true. Who else have we got? Hi Malcolm. Hi Em. And we've got John. Hi John. And we've got Jenny. We've got Secret Martin. Hi Secret Martin. Hi, not so Secret Martin. Not so secret now, are you?
Previously on Secret Martin.
The show I didn't know I needed.
I would watch that. I'd watch that show. Oh. So, how are you today? That's you. Yes, you. I'm talking to you specifically.
A year older.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, yes.
In a day? Oh,
But wiser. Wiser and riper like a delicious cheese. Right? We're all getting riper and riper.
did you know?
I mean, I haven't had a shower since March, so yeah.
Mm. Mm.
There's a small village in Switzerland where it's traditional to, when you're quite young, go and purchase a cheese and put it in special storage. And it's your death cheese, so that you make sure that there's definitely going to be some nice cheese at your funeral.
Is that
Fascinating.
That is true.
is that true though?
That is true. There's it's only a small village in Switzerland. It's not every Swiss person, but they have death cheeses.
Can somebody Google this for me?
Yep, on it.
Just Google it. It is legit.
I don't know. Tristan. Come back. Yes, all is forgiven. Oh no. Oh no, I hope he comes back. Although if he doesn't come back, I'll be really impressed by his commitment to a bit. Oh, here he is. Here he is. Come crawling back. I'm glad you're back. Don't leave us again.
I'm not missing story time for the sake of faux outrage. Did somebody Google
Yes.
how distrustful is Frankie while I was away?
I think it's also worth Googling how many times has Tristan bullshitted with us?
Name one.
That's the problem. It's been too long since I've seen you. Clearly, we don't talk.
That is true. That is 100% true.
How are we doing
Meeting
for time?
Edith.
Les enfants.
Story
How are we doing
time.
for time? Is it? Is it? Oh, no. Okay, well, it looks like Katie and Nick might not be here. So, Katie and Nick, if you're watching this on catch up, hello, we miss you. Michael, you're in the hot seat now. That means you have to do it like Katie does. So you've got to come in and you've got to whisper.
It's story time.
Story time. Thank you. Thank you, pseudo Katie.
I mean,
Right.
you really just need a disorganizer so that you'll know when to tell stories.
That is true. That is true. Okay, right. Okay, this is happening. I'm muting you all. You're all muted. Right. Now, are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. The fog was rising fast. All morning it had hung around in alleys and cellars. Now it was moving back in for the night. It came out of the ground and up from the river and down from the sky, a clinging, yellowish, stinging blanket, the river Ankh in droplet form. It found its way through cracks and, against all common sense, managed to survive in lighted rooms, filling the air with an eye-watering haze and making the candles crackle. Outdoors, every figure loomed, every shape was a menace. In a drab alley off a drab street, Angua stopped, squared her shoulders, and pushed open a door. The atmosphere in the long, low, dark room altered as she stepped inside. A moment of time. Oh, is somebody... Are we having Robo, Frankie? Is it mostly okay? Okay, sorry, to the catch-up crew, there's difficulty in the chat. I hope it's all okay. Right. What was I saying? The atmosphere. The atmosphere in the long, low, dark room altered as she stepped inside. A moment of time rang like a glass bowl, and then there was a sense of relaxation. People turned back in their seats. Well, they were seated. It was quite likely that they were people. Cheery moved closer to Angua. "What's this place called?" she whispered. "It hasn't really got a name," said Angua, "but sometimes we call it Beers." "It didn't look like an inn outside. How did you find it?" "You don't. You gravitate to it." Cheery looked around nervously. She wasn't sure where they were, apart from somewhere in the cattle market district, somewhere up a maze of alleys. Angua walked to the bar. A deeper shadow appeared out of the gloom. "Hello, Angua," it said in a deep, rolling voice. "Fruit juice, is it?" "Yes, chilled." "And what about the dwarf?" "She'll have him raw," said a voice somewhere in the gloom. There was a ripple of laughter in the dark. Some of it sounded altogether too strange to Cheery. She couldn't imagine it issuing from normal lips. I'll have a fruit juice too," she quavered. Angua glanced at the dwarf. She felt oddly grateful that the remark from the darkness seemed to have gone entirely over the small bullet head. She unhooked her badge and with care and deliberation laid it down on the counter. It went plink. Then Angua leaned forward and showed the iconograph to the barman. If it was a man, Cheery wasn't sure yet. A sign over the bar said, "Don't you ever change." "You know everything that's going on, Igor," Angua said. "2 old men got killed yesterday, and a load of clay got stolen from Igneous the Troll recently. Did you ever hear about that?" What's that to you? Killing old men is against the law, said Angua. Of course, a lot of things are against the law, so we're very busy in the watch. We like to be busy about important things. Otherwise, we have to be busy about unimportant things. Are you hearing me? The shadow considered this. Go and take a seat, it said. I'll bring your drinks. Angua led the way to a table in an alcove. The clientele lost interest in them. A buzz of conversation resumed. What is this place? Cheery whispered. It's a place where people can be themselves, said Angua slowly. People who have to be a little careful at other times. You know? No. Angua sighed. Vampires, zombies, bogeymen, ghouls, oh my. She corrected herself. The differently alive, she said. People who have to spend most of their time being very careful, not frightening people, fitting in. That's how it works here. Fit in, get a job, don't worry people, and you probably won't find a crowd outside with pitchforks and flaming torches. But sometimes it's good to go where everyone knows your shape. Now that Shiri's eyes had grown accustomed to the low light, she could make out the variety of shapes on the benches. Some of them were a lot bigger than human. Some had pointy ears and long muzzles. Who's that girl? She said. She looks normal. That's Violet. She's a tooth fairy. And next to her is Schleppel, the bogeyman. In the far corner, something sat huddled in a huge overcoat under a high, broad-brimmed pointed hat. And him? That's old man Trouble, said Angua. If you know what's good for you, you don't mind him. Any werewolves here? One or two, said Angua. I hate werewolves. Oh? The oddest customer was sitting by herself at a small round table. She appeared to be a very old lady in a shawl and a straw hat with flowers in it. She was staring in front of her with an expression of good-natured aimlessness, and in context looked more frightening than any of the shadowy figures. What is she? Cheery hissed. Her? Oh, that's Mrs. Gamage. And what does she do? Do? Well, she comes in here most days for a drink and some company. Sometimes they have a sing-song, old songs that she remembers. She's practically blind. If you mean is she an undead? No, she isn't. Not a vampire, a werewolf, a zombie, or a bogeyman. Just an old lady. A huge, shambling, hairy thing paused at Mrs. Gamage's table and put a glass in front of her. Port and lemon. There you goes, Mrs. Gamage, it rumbled. Cheers, Charlie, the old lady cackled. How's the plumbing business? Going fine, love, said the bogeyman, and vanished into the gloom. That was a plumber, said Cheery. Of course not. I don't know who Charlie was. He probably died years ago. But she thinks the bogeyman is him, and who's going to tell her different? You mean she doesn't know this place is... Look, she's been coming here ever since the old days when it was the Crown and Axe, said Angua. No one wants to spoil things. Everyone likes Mrs. Gamage. They watch out for her, help her out in little ways. How? Well, I heard that last month someone broke into her hovel and stole some of her stuff. That doesn't sound helpful. And it was all returned next day, and a couple of thieves were found in the shades with not a drop of blood left in their bodies. Angua smiled, and her voice took on a mocking edge. You know, you get told a lot of bad things about the undead, but you never hear about the marvelous work they do in the community. Igor the barman appeared. He looked more or less human, apart from the hair on the back of his hands and the single unbifurcated eyebrow across his forehead. He tossed a couple of mats on the table and put their drinks down. You're probably wishing this was a dwarf bar, said Angua. She lifted her beer mat carefully and glanced at the underside. Cheery looked around again. By now, if it had been a dwarf bar, the floor would be sticky with beer, the air would be full of flying quaff, and people would be singing. They'd probably be singing the latest dwarf tune, Gold, 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 or one of the old favourites like Gold, 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 or the all-time biggie, Gold, Gold, Gold. In a few minutes, the first axe would have been thrown. No, she said, it could never be that bad. Drink up, said Angua. We've got to go and see something. A large, hairy hand grabbed Angua's wrist. She looked up into a terrifying face, all eyes and mouth and hair. Hello, Schlitzen, she said calmly. I'm hearing where there's a baron who's really unhappy about you, said Schlitzen, alcohol crystallizing on his breath. That's my business, Schlitzen, said Angua. Why don't you just go back behind your door like the good bogeyman that you are? Ah, he's saying where you're disgracing the old country. Let go, please, said Angua. Her skin was white where Schlitzen was gripping her. Cheery looked from the wrist to the bogeyman's shoulder. Rangy though the creature was, muscles were strung along the arm like beads on a wire. Ah, you wearing a badge, it sneered. What's a good wear? Angua moved so fast that she was a blur. Her free hand pulled something from her belt and flipped it up and onto Schlitzen's head. He stopped and stood swaying back and forth gently, making faint moaning sounds. On his head, flopping down around his ears like the knotted hanky of a style-impaired seaside sunbather, was a small square of heavy material. Angua pushed back her chair and grabbed the beer mat. The shadowy figures around the walls were muttering. Let's get out of here, she said. Igor, give us half a minute and then you can take the blanket off him. Come on. They hurried out. The fog had already turned the sun into a mere suggestion, but it was vivid daylight compared to the gloom in beers. What happened to him? Said Cheery, running to keep up with Angua's stride. Existential uncertainty, Angua said. He doesn't know whether he exists or not. It's cruel, I know, but it's the only thing we've found that works against bogeymen. Blue fluffy blanket for preference. She noted Cheery's blank expression. Look, bogeymen go away if you put your head under the blankets. Everyone knows that, don't they? So if you put their head under a blanket... Oh, I see. Oh, that's nasty. He'll feel all right in 10 minutes. Angua skimmed the beer mat across the alley. What was he saying about a baron? I wasn't really listening, said Angua carefully. Cheery shivered in the fog, but not just from the cold. He sounded like he came from Oberwald, like us. There was a baron who lived near us and he hated people to leave. Yes, the whole family were werewolves. One of them ate my second cousin. Angua's memory spun in a hurry. Old meals came back to haunt her from the time before she'd said, no, this is not the way to live. A dwarf. A dwarf. No, she was pretty sure she'd never... The family had always made fun of her eating habits. That's why I can't stand them, said Cheery. Oh, people say they can be tamed, but I say once a wolf, always a wolf. You can't trust them. They're basically evil, aren't they? They could go back to the wild at any moment, I say. Yes, you may be right. And the worst thing is, most of the time they walk around looking just like real people. Angua blinked, glad of the twin disguises of the fog and Cheery's unquestioning confidence. Come on, we're nearly there. Where? We're going to see someone who's either our murderer or who knows where the murderer is. Cheery stopped. But you've only got a sword and I haven't even got that. Don't worry, we won't need weapons. Oh, good. They wouldn't be any use. Oh. Vimes opened his door to see what all the shouting was about down in the office. The corporal manning, or in this case dwarfing, the desk was having trouble. Again? How many times have you been killed this week? I was minding my own business, said the unseen complainer. Stacking garlic? You're a vampire, aren't you? I mean, let's see what jobs you've been doing. Post sharpener for a fencing firm, sunglasses tester for Argos opticians. Is it me or is there some underlying trend here? Excuse me, Commander Vimes? Vimes looked round into a smiling face that sought only to do good in the world, even if the world had other things it wanted done. Constable visit, yes, he said hurriedly. At the moment, I'm afraid I'm rather busy, and I'm not even sure that I have got an immortal soul. And perhaps you could call again when... It's about these words you asked me to check, said Visit reproachfully. What words? The ones Father Tubalcheck wrote in his own blood. You said to try and find out what they meant. Oh yes. Come on into my office. Vimes relaxed. This wasn't going to be another one of those painful conversations about the state of his soul and the necessity of giving it a wash and brush up before eternal damnation set in. This was going to be about something important. It's ancient Cenotine, sir. It's out of one of their holy books, although, of course, when I say holy, it is in fact that they were basically misguided in a... Yes, I'm sure, said Vimes, sitting down. Does it by any chance say, Mr. X did it, No, sir. That phrase does not appear anywhere in any known holy book, sir. Said Vimes. Besides, I looked at other documents in the room and the paper does not appear to be in the deceased's handwriting, sir. Vimes brightened up. Someone else's. Does it say something like, take that, you bastard? We've been waiting years to get you for what you did all those years ago. No, sir. That phrase also does not appear in any holy book anywhere, said Constable Visit, and hesitated. Except in the Apocrypha to the Vengeful Testament of Offler, he added conscientiously. These words are from the Cenotine Book of Truth, he sniffed, as it's called. It's what their false gods... Could I perhaps just have the words and leave out the comparative religion, said Vimes. Very well, sir. Visit looked hurt, but unfolded a piece of paper and sniffed disparagingly. These are some of the rules that their god allegedly gave to the first people after he'd baked them out of clay, sir. Rules like, thou shalt labour fruitfully all the days of your life, sir, and thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt be humble. That sort of thing. Is that all? Said Vimes. Yes, sir, said Visit. They're just religious quotations. Yes, sir. Any idea where it was in his mouth? Poor devil looked like he was having a last cigarette. No, sir. I could understand if it was one of the smite your enemies ones, said Vimes. But that's just saying, get on with your work and don't make trouble. Zeno was a rather liberal god, sir, not big on commandments. Sounds almost decent as gods go. Visit looked disapproving. The Cenotines died through 500 years of waging some of the bloodiest wars on the continent, sir. Spare the thunderbolts and spoil the congregation, eh? Said Vimes. Pardon, sir? Oh, nothing. Well, thank you, Constable. I'll see that Captain Carrot is informed, and thank you once again. Don't let me keep you from... Vimes's desperately accelerating voice was too late to prevent Visit pulling a roll of paper out of his breastplate. I've brought you the latest Unadorned Facts magazine, sir, and also this month's Battle Call, which contains many articles that I'm sure will be of interest to you, including Pastor Nasal Peddler's exhortation to the congregation to rise up and speak to people sincerely through their letterboxes, sir. Thank you. I can't help noticing that the pamphlets and magazines I gave you last week are still on your desk where I left them, sir. Oh, yes, well, sorry, you know how it is. The amount of work these days makes it so hard to find the time to... It's never too soon to contemplate eternal damnation, sir. I think about it all the time, Constable. Thank you. Unfair, thought Vimes when Visit had gone. A note is left at the scene of a crime in my town, and does it have the decency to be a death threat? No. The last dying scrawl of a man determined to nab his murderer? No. It's a bit of religious doggerel. What's the good of clues that are more mysterious than the mystery? He scribbled a note on Visit's translation and chucked it into his in-tray. Too late, Angua remembered why she avoided the slaughterhouse district at this time of the month. She could change at will at any time. That's what people forgot about werewolves. But they remembered the important thing. Full moonlight was the irresistible trigger. The lunar rays reached down into the centre of her morphic memory and flipped all the switches, whether she wanted them switched or not. Full moon was only a couple of days away, and the delicious smell of the penned animals and the blood from the slaughterhouses was chiming against her strict vegetarianism. The clash was bringing on her PLT. She glared at the shadowy building in front of her. I think we'll go round the back, she said, and you can knock. Me? They won't take any notice of me, said Cheery. You show them your badge and tell them you're the watch. They'll ignore me. They'll laugh at me. You're going to have to do it sooner or later. Come on. The door was opened by a stout man in a bloody apron. He was shocked to have his belt grabbed by one dwarf hand, while another dwarf hand was thrust in front of his face holding a badge, and a dwarf voice in the region of his navel said, "We're the watch, right? Oh, yes, and if you don't let us in, we'll have your guts for starters." Good try, murmured Angua. She lifted Cheery out of the way and smiled brightly at the butcher. Mr. Sock, we'd like to speak to an employee of yours, Mr. Dorf. The man hadn't quite got over Cheery, but he managed to rally. Mr. Dorf, what's he done now? We'd just like to talk to him. May we come in? Mr. Sock looked at Cheery, who was trembling with nerves and excitement. I have a choice, he said. Let's say you have a kind of choice, said Angua. She tried to close her nostrils against the beguiling miasma of blood. There was even a sausage factory on the premises. It used all the bits of animals no one would ever otherwise eat or even recognise. The odours of the abattoir turned her human stomach, but deep inside, part of her sat up and drooled and begged at the mingling smells of pork and beef and lamb and mutton and rat. she said, sniffing. I didn't know you supplied the dwarf market, Mr. Sock. Mr. Sock was suddenly a man who wished to be seen to be cooperative. Dwarf, come here right now. There was the sound of footsteps and a figure emerged from behind a rack of beef carcasses. Some people had a thing about the undead. Angua knew Commander Vimes was uneasy in their presence, although he was getting better these days. People always needed someone to feel superior to. The living hated the undead, and the undead loathed, she felt her fists clench, the unalive. The golem called Dorf lurched a little because one leg was slightly shorter than the other. It didn't wear any clothes because there was nothing whatsoever to conceal, and so she could see the mottling on it where fresh clay had been added over the years. There was so much patching that she wondered how old it could be. Originally, some attempt had been made to depict human musculature, but the repairs had nearly obscured these. The thing looked like the kind of pots Igneous despised, the ones made by people who thought that because it was handmade, it was supposed to look as if it was handmade, and that thumbprints baked into the clay were a sign of integrity. That was it. The thing looked handmade. Of course, over the years, it had mostly made itself, one repair at a time. Its triangular eyes glowed faintly. There were no pupils, just the dark red glow of a banked fire. It was holding a long, heavy cleaver. Cheery's stare gravitated to this and remained fixed on it in terrified fascination. The other hand grasped a piece of string, on the end of which was a large, hairy, and very smelly goat. What are you doing, Dorf? The golem nodded towards the goat. Feeding the Judas goat? Dorf nodded again. Have you got something to do, Mr. Sock? Said Angua. No, You have got something to do, Mr. Sock, said Angua emphatically. Yes. Yes, okay. I'll just go and see to the offal boilers. As the butcher walked away, he stopped to wave a finger under the place where Dorf's nose would be if the golem had had a nose. If you've been causing trouble, he began. I expect those boilers could really do with attention, said Angua sharply. He hurried off. There was silence in the yard, although the sounds of the city drifted in over the walls. From the other side of the slaughterhouse, there was the occasional bleat of a worried sheep. Dorf stood stock still, holding his cleaver and looking down at the ground. Is it a troll made to look like a human? Whispered Cheery. Look at those eyes. It's not a troll, said Angua. It's a golem, a man of clay. It's a machine. It looks like a human. That's because it's a machine made for looking like a human. She walked around behind the thing. I'm going to read your chem, Dorf, she said. The golem let go of the goat and raised the cleaver, and brought it down sharply onto a chopping block beside Cheery, making the dwarf leap sideways. Then it pulled around a slate that was slung over its shoulder on a piece of string, unhooked the pencil, and wrote, Yes. When Angua put her hand up, Cheery realised that there was a thin line across the golem's forehead. To her horror, the entire top of the head flipped up. Angua, quite unperturbed, reached inside. Her hand came out holding a yellowing scroll. The golem froze. The eyes faded. Angua unrolled the paper. Some kind of holy writing, she said. It always is. Some old dead religion. You've killed it? No. You can't take away what isn't there. She put the scroll back and closed the head with a click. The golem came alive again, the glow returning to its eyes. Cheery had been holding her breath. It came out in a rush. "What did you do?" she managed. "Tell her, Dorfl," said Angua. The golem's thick fingers were a blur as the pencil scratched across the slate. "I am a golem. I was made of clay. My life is the words. By means of words of purpose in my head, I acquire life. My life is to work. I obey all commands. I take no rest." "What words of purpose?" "Relevant texts that are the focus of belief. Golem must work. Golem must have a master." The goat lay down beside the golem and started to chew cud. "There have been 2 murders," said Angua. "I'm pretty certain a golem did one and probably both. Can you tell us anything, Dorfl?" "Sorry, look," said Cheery. "Are you telling me this thing is powered by words? I mean, is it telling me it's powered by words?" "Why not? Words do have power. Everyone knows that," said Angua. "There are more golems around than you might think. They're out of fashion now, but they last. They can work underwater or in total darkness or knee-deep in poison for years. They don't need rest or feeding. But that's slavery," said Cheery. "Of course it isn't. You might as well enslave a doorknob. Have you got anything to tell me, Dorfl?" Cheery kept looking at the cleaver in the block. Words like length and heavy and sharp were filling her head more snugly than any words could have filled the clay skull of the golem. Dorfl said nothing. "How long have you been working here, Dorfl?" "Now 300 days already." "And you have time off?" "To make a hollow laughing. What would I do with time off?" "I mean, you're not always in the slaughterhouse." "Sometimes I make deliveries." "And meet other golems?" "Now listen, Dorfl, I know you things keep it in touch somehow. And if a golem is killing real people, I wouldn't give a busted teacup for your chances. Folk will be along here straight away with flaming torches and sledgehammers. You get my drift?" The golem shrugged. "They cannot take away what does not exist," it wrote. Angua threw up her hands. "I'm trying to be civilized," she said. "I could confiscate you right now. The charge would be being obstructive when it's been a long day and I've had enough. Do you know Father Tubelchek? The old priest who lives on the bridge?" "How come you know him?" "I have made deliveries there." "He's been murdered. Where were you when he was killed?" "In the slaughterhouse." "How do you know?" Dorfl hesitated a moment. Then the next words were written very slowly, as if they had come from a long way away after a great deal of thought. "Because it is something that must have happened not long ago. Because you are excited. For the last 3 days I have been working here." "All the time?" "Yes." 24 hours a day?" "Yes. Men and trolls here on every shift. They will tell you. During the day I must slaughter, dress, quarter, joint and bone, and at night without rest I must make sausages and boil up the livers, hearts, tripes, kidneys and chitterlings." "That's awful," said Cheery. The pencil blurred briefly. "Close." Dorfl turned his head slowly to look at Angua and wrote, "Do you need me further?" "If we do, we know where to find you." "I am sorry about the old man." "Good. Come on, Cheery." They felt the golem's eyes on them as they left the yard. "Was lying," said Cheery. "Why do you say that?" It looked as if it was lying. You're probably right, said Angua, but you can see the size of the place. I bet we wouldn't be able to prove it had stepped out for half an hour. I think I'll suggest that we put it under what Commander Vimes calls special surveillance. What, like plain clothes? Something like that, said Angua carefully. Funny to see a pet goat in a slaughterhouse, I thought, said Cheery as they walked on through the fog. What? Oh, you mean the Judas goat, said Angua. Most slaughterhouses have one. It's not a pet. I suppose you could call it an employee. Employee? What kind of job could it possibly do? Walk into the slaughterhouse every day. That's its job. Look, you've got a pen full of frightened animals, right? And they're milling around and leaderless, and there's this ramp into this building, looks very scary. And hey, there's this goat, it's not scared, and so the flock follows it, and... Angua made a throat-slitting noise. Only the goat walks out. That's horrible! I suppose it makes sense from the goat's point of view. At least it does walk out, said Angua. How did you know about this? Oh, you pick up all sorts of odds and ends of stuff in the watch. I've got a lot to learn, I can see, said Cheery. I never thought you had to carry bits of blanket for a start. It's special equipment if you're dealing with the undead. Well, I knew about garlic and vampires. Anything holy works on vampires. What else works on werewolves? Sorry, said Angua, who was still thinking about the golem. I've got a silver mail vest which I promised my family I'd wear, but is anything else good for werewolves? Gin and tonic's always welcome, said Angua distantly. Angua? Yes? What? Someone told me that there was a werewolf in the watch. I can't believe that. Angua stopped and stared down at her. I mean, sooner or later the wolf comes through, said Cheery. I'm surprised Commander Vimes allows it. There is a werewolf in the watch, yes, said Angua. I knew there was something odd about Constable Visit. Angua's jaw dropped. He always looks hungry, said Cheery, and he's got that odd smile all the time. I know a werewolf when I see one. He does look a bit hungry, that's true, said Angua. She couldn't think of anything else to say. Well, I'm going to be keeping my distance. Fine, said Angua. Angua? Yes. Why do you wear your badge on a collar around your neck? What? Oh, well, so it's always handy, you know, in any circumstances. Do I need to do that? I shouldn't think so. Mr. Sock jumped. Dwarf, you damn stupid lump. Never sneak up behind a man on the bacon slicer. I've told you that before. Try to make some noise when you move, damn you. The golem held up its slate, which said, Tonight I cannot work. What's this? A bacon slicer never asks for time off. It is a holy day. Sock looked at the red eyes. Old Fishbein had said something about this, hadn't he, when he'd sold Dorf? Something like, sometimes it'll go off for a few hours because it's a holy day. It's the words in its head. If it doesn't go and trot off to its temple or whatever it is, the words will stop working. Don't ask me why. There's no point in stopping it. $530 the thing had cost. He thought it was a bargain, and it was a bargain, no doubt about that. The damn thing only ever stopped working when it had run out of things to do. Sometimes not even then, according to the stories. You heard about golems flooding out houses because no one told them to stop carrying water from the well, or washing the dishes until the plates were thin as paper. Stupid things, but useful if you kept your eye on them. And yet, he could see why no one seemed to keep them for long. It was the way the damned two-handed engine just stood there, taking it all in and putting it where? And never complained or spoke at all. A man could get worried about a bargain like that and feel mightily relieved when he was writing out a receipt for the new owner. Seems to me there's been a lot of holy days recently, Sock said. Some times are more holy than others. But they couldn't skive off, could they? Work was what a golem did. I don't know how we're going to manage, Sock began. It is a holy day. Oh, all right. You can have time off tomorrow. Tonight, holy day starts at sunset. But be back quickly then, said Sock weakly, or I'll... You be back quickly, do you hear? That was another thing. You couldn't threaten the creatures. You certainly couldn't withhold their pay because they didn't get any. You couldn't frighten them. Fishbein had said that a weaver over Knapp Hillway had ordered his golem to smash itself to bits with a hammer. And it had. Yes, I hear. In a way, it didn't matter who they were. In fact, their anonymity was part of the whole business. They thought themselves part of the march of history, the tide of progress and the wave of the future. They were men who felt that the time had come. Regimes can survive barbarian hordes, crazed terrorists and hooded secret societies, but they're in real trouble when prosperous and anonymous men sit around a big table and think thoughts like that. One said, at least it's clean this way. No blood. And it would be for the good of the city, of course. They nodded gravely. No one needed to say that what was good for them was good for Ankh-Morpork. And he won't die. Apparently, he could be kept merely unwell. The dosage can be varied, I'm told. Good. I'd rather have him unwell than dead. I wouldn't trust Vetinari to stay in a grave. I've heard that he once said he'd prefer to be cremated, as a matter of fact. Then I just hope they scatter the ashes really widely, that's all. What about the watch? What about it? Oh, sorry. Uncomfortable. Lord Vetinari opened his eyes. Against all rationality, his hair ached. He concentrated, and a blur by the bed focused into the shape of Samuel Vimes. Oh, Vimes, he said weakly. How are you feeling, sir? Truly dreadful. Who was that little man with the incredibly bandy legs? That was Donut Jimmy, sir. He used to be a jockey on a very fat horse. A racehorse? Apparently, sir. A fat racehorse. Surely that could never win a race. Oh, I don't believe it ever did, sir. But Jimmy made a lot of money by not winning races. He gave me milk and some sort of sticky potion. Vetinari concentrated. I was heartily sick. So I understand, sir. Funny phrase that. Heartily sick. I wonder why it's a cliche. Sounds jolly. Rather cheerful, really. Yes, sir. Feel like I've got a bad dose of flu, Vimes. Head not working properly. Really, sir? The patrician thought for a while. There was obviously something else on his mind. Why did he still smell of horses, Vimes? He said at last. He's a horse doctor, sir. A damn good one. I heard last month he treated dire fortune and it didn't fall over until the last furlong. Doesn't sound helpful, Vimes. Oh, I don't know, sir. The horse had dropped dead coming up to the starting line. Ah, I see. Well, well, well. What a nasty, suspicious mind you have, Vimes. Thank you, sir. The patrician raised himself on his elbows. Should toenails throb, Vimes? Couldn't say, sir. Now, I think I should like to read for a while. Life goes on, eh? Vimes went to the window. There was a nightmarish figure crouched on the edge of the balcony outside, staring into the thickening fog. Everything all right, Constable Downspout? Yes, sir, said the apparition. I'll shut the window now. The fog is coming in. Right you are, sir. Vimes closed the window, trapping a few tendrils which gradually faded away. What was that? Said Lord Vetinari. Constable Downspout's a gargoyle, sir. He's no good on parade and bloody useless on the street, but when it comes to staying in one place, sir, you can't beat him. He's world champion at not moving. If you want the winner of the 100 metres standing still, that's him. He spent 3 days on a roof in the rain when we caught the Park Lane Nobbler. Nothing will get past him. And there's Corporal Gimletson patrolling the corridor, and Constable Glod's nephew on the floor below, and Constables Flint and Moraine in the rooms on either side of you. And Sergeant Detritus will be around constantly, so that if anyone nods off, he'll kick arse, sir. And you'll know when he does that, because the poor bugger will come right through the wall. Well done, Vimes. Am I right in thinking that all my guards are non-human? They all seem to be dwarfs and trolls. Save his way, sir. You've thought of everything, Vimes. Hope so, sir. Thank you, Vimes. Vetinari sat up and took a mass of papers off the bedside table. And now, don't let me detain you. Vimes's mouth dropped open. Vetinari looked up. Was there anything else, Commander? Well, I suppose not, sir. I suppose I'd better just run along, eh? If you wouldn't mind. And I'm sure a lot of paperwork has accumulated in my office, so if you'd send someone to fetch it, I would be obliged. Vimes shut the door behind him, a little harder than necessary. God, it made him livid the way Vetinari turned him on and off like a switch, and had as much natural gratitude as an alligator. The patrician relied on Vimes doing his job, knew he'd do his job, and that was the extent of his thought on the matter. Well, one day Vimes would bloody well do his job, of course, because he didn't know how to do anything else. But realising that made it all the worse. Outside the palace, the fog was thick and yellow. Vimes nodded to the guards on the door and looked out at the clinging, swirling clouds. It was almost a straight line to the watch house in Pseudopolis Yard, and the fog had brought early night to the city. Not many people were on the streets. They stayed indoors, barring the windows against the damp shreds that seemed to leak in everywhere. Yes. Empty streets, a chilly night, dampness in the air. Only one thing was needed to make it perfect. He sent the sedan men on home and walked back to one of the guards. You're Constable Lucker, aren't you? Yes, sir, Sir Samuel. What size boots do you take? Lucker looked panicky. What, sir? It's a simple question, man. 7.5, sir. From old Plugger in New Cobblers, the cheap ones. Yes, sir. Can't have a man guarding the palace in cardboard boots, said Vimes with mock cheerfulness. Off with them, Constable. You can have mine. They've still got wyvern, Well, whatever it is wyverns do on 'em, but they'll fit you. Don't stand there with your mouth open. Give me your boots, man. You can keep mine. Vimes added, I've got lots. The constable watched in frightened astonishment as Vimes pulled on the cheap pair and stood upright, stamping a few times with his eyes shut. Ah, he said. I'm in front of the palace, right? Yes, sir. You've just come out of it, sir. It's this big building here. Ah, said Vimes brightly, but I'd know I was here even if I hadn't. It's the flagstones, said Vimes. They're an unusual size and slightly dished in the middle. Haven't you noticed? Your feet, lads. That's what you'll have to learn to think with. The bemused constable watched him disappear into the fog, stamping happily. Corporal the Right Honourable the Earl of Ankh, Nobby Nobbs, pushed open the watch-house door and staggered inside. Sergeant Colom looked up from the desk and gasped. You okay, Nobby? He said, hurrying around to support the swaying figure. It's terrible, Fred. Terrible. Hey, take a seat. You're all pale. I've been elevated, Fred, moaned Nobby. Nasty. Did you see who did it? Nobby wordlessly handed him the scroll Dragon King of Arms had pressed into his hand and flopped back. He took a tiny length of homemade cigarette from behind his ear and lit it with a shaking hand. I don't know, I'm sure, he said. You do your best, you keep your head down, you don't make any trouble, and then something like this happens to you. Colon read the scroll slowly, his lips moving when it came to difficult words like and the. Nobby, you've read this? It says you're a lord. The old man said they'd have to do a lot of checking up, but he thought it was pretty clear, what with the ring and all. Fred, what am I going to do? Sit back and eat off ermine plates, I should think. That's just it, Fred. There's no money. No big house, no land, not a brass farthing. What, nothing? Not a dried pea, Fred. I thought all the upper crust had pots of money. Well, I'm the crust on its uppers, Fred. I don't know anything about lording. I don't want to have to wear posh clothes and go to hunt balls and all that stuff. Sergeant Colon sat down beside him. You never suspected you've got any posh connections? Well, my cousin Vincent once got done for indecently assaulting the Duchess of Quirm's housemaid. Chambermaid or scullery maid? Scullery maid, I think. Probably doesn't count then. Does anyone else know about this? Well, she did, and then she went and told... I meant about your lordshipping. Only Mr. Vimes. Well, there you are, said Sergeant Colon, handing him back the scroll. You don't have to tell anyone. Then you don't have to go around wearing golden trousers, and you needn't hunt balls unless you've lost them. You just sit there and I'll fetch you a cup of tea. How about that? We'll see it through, don't you worry. You're a toff, Fred. That makes two of us, my lord. Colon waggled his eyebrows. Get it? Get it? Don't, Fred, said Nobby wearily. The watch-house door opened. Fog poured in like smoke. In the midst of it were two red eyes. The parting shreds revealed the massive figure of a golem. Said Sergeant Colon. The golem held up its slate. I have come to you. Yeah. I can see that, said Colon. Dorf turned the slate around. The other side read, I give myself up for murder. It was I who killed the old priest. The crime is solved. Colon, once his lips had stopped moving, scurried behind the suddenly very flimsy defences of his desk and scrabbled through the papers there. You keep it covered, Nobby, he said. Make sure it don't run off. Why is it gonna run off? Said Nobby. Sergeant Colon found a relatively clean piece of paper. Well, I guess I'd better... What's your name? The golem wrote. Dorf. Ta-da! Ta-da! Ta-da!
Every time. Every time.
Every time. Every time.
How dare they treat golems like that? I'm very upset.
Wait.
Very nice.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
So how many people here think it actually was Thor?
Well, if it was the golem at the beginning.
Oh, blimey, Gov. It was me what did it.
Now tell me what I did. And how.
So
When and where.
interrogated by detritus.
Yep.
You got me banged to rights.
But Nobby voice is a delight.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I'm enjoying doing it, as you can probably tell. Nobby will definitely be making an appearance in future books. Nobby and Callanish is just going to be the only characters in the next book.
Oh my god, they will hate each other.
Hate each other so badly.
So
Oh.
I can't help but notice, like, between this and Monstrous Regiment, like, Pratchett has a recurring interest in the idea of, like, passing masculine.
Mm.
Oh, in passing what?
Like the idea of, like, passing, like, passing as masculine or male when your, like, actual gender expression is something completely different. Like, between
Although,
that and Regiment, like...
yeah. Although also, like that is definitely something that is like that I have an interest in, and I have selected those two books. So this is like the sample is definitely slightly tweaked here, and then I was like, ooh, gender stuff. Maybe I'll read those two.
Like if you read one of the Rincewind books, for instance, there is none of that at all. It's just blind panic and running away for about 300 pages.
Rincewind was his earliest books, though.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
This isn't really particularly relevant, but just side note, I've always visualized Rincewind as Tim Minchin.
Oh, I would like him so much more if he were played by Tim Minchin.
Oh my god, Tim Minchin.
He's like an assistant librarian who just keeps running away from things trying to kill him. Yeah.
I would watch that. I would watch that. Someone tweet him.
I would also watch Monstrous Regiment, but where every male character is played by Tim Minchin.
What, and all the female characters as well. I just want Tim Minchin.
Tim Minchin one man show Monstrous Regiment.
Tim Minchin.
I don't know. You know what? I'd be down for Robert Pattinson as Strappy.
Literally just that one extra person.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I love it.
Very much so. Folks, I'm going to have to jet off. So I will love you and leave you.
We say goodbye to the catch-up crew?
Yes, we shall say goodbye to the catch-up crew. Thank you. I had not forgotten that. Catch-up crew. Catch-up crew. We love you. Hope you enjoyed it. Good night. Good night. Good night.